Welcome, everyone, to the webinar on Work Incentives in Action. Listening to the webinar. The audio for today's webinar is being broadcast through your computer. Please make sure your speakers are turned on or headphones are plugged in. You can control the audio broadcast via the Audio Broadcast panel. If you accidentally close the panel, you can reopen by going to the Communicate menu, which is located at the top of the screen, and choose Join Audio Broadcast. Listening to the webinar continued. If you do not have sound capabilities on your computer or you prefer to listen by phone, you can dial into 1-855-241-8681. The event number is 668-513-983. You do not need to enter an attendee ID. Captioning. Real-time captioning is provided during this webinar. The captions can be found in the media viewer panel, which appears in the lower right-hand corner of the webinar platform. If you want to make the media viewer panel larger, you can minimize other panels like chat, Q&A, and/or participants. Submitting questions. For Q&A, please use the chat box or the Q&A box to send any questions you have during the webinar, and we will direct them accordingly during the Q&A portion. If you are listening by phone and not logged into the webinar, you can also ask questions by emailing them directly to me. My name is Al Miliato, and my email address is amiliato@ndi-inc.org. Please note the webinar is being recorded and materials will be placed on the web page, which you're seeing there with the link. It's www.nationaldisabilityinstitute.org/resources/empowerednyc-webinars. Technical assistance. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box to send me a message, again, Al Miliato, or you can email me at amiliato@ndi-inc.org. And with that, we'll kick off the webinar with an introduction from Nancy Bhutto. Nancy, are you on mute?
I am on mute. I just gave a great joke, and everybody missed it. I'm just kidding. Sorry. Welcome, everybody. This is Nancy Bhutto with National Disability Institute. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very happy to be bringing you two great speakers and talking to you about some work incentives and how they're working in favor for individuals with disabilities receiving SSI and/or SSDI. So first, before we get started, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Empowered New York City in case you're new to this webinar series. Empowered NYC is an initiative that has created new strategies and tools to enable New Yorkers with disabilities to improve their financial stability. The initiative is advancing financial capability by offering tailored one-on-one financial counseling for people with disabilities, enhanced with new expertise, outreach, and tools. So the counselors have gone through a significant amount of training in benefits planning so that they have that added expertise. And then what we're also doing is providing these monthly webinar trainings for service providers and other entities who are interested in learning more about the project. We have several partners that we work with on this initiative. First is the City of New York, led by the New York City Department of Consumer Affairs, Office of Financial Empowerment, and the New York City Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, as well as us, National Disability Institute, City Community Development, POSIS Family Foundation, and we also have an advisory board of municipal offices, disability service providers, and financial empowerment service providers. And for those of you who have been on our webinars from the beginning, we used to have all of those folks come on and welcome you as well and give a little introduction about their agencies. We don't do that anymore. However, if you go onto our website, when you get this PowerPoint, or for those of you who pre-registered and had it sent out to you, we have about 9 slides at the end of the presentation that give you more information on Department of Consumer Affairs, on the Mayor's Office, on City Community Development. So you can always look at those slides and find more information about them later. So referrals, I love to say that we are open for business. So please refer individuals to one of our financial counselors. Again, they specialize in one-on-one financial counseling. The services are free and always confidential. Counselors can help the person access their credit score, and the counselors have a deeper knowledge of disability benefits, so that individuals who are on either SSI, Supplemental Security Income, or SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, the counselors have knowledge of those Social Security Administration benefits as they're providing financial counseling. So we're very happy to be able to offer that service. So sessions will be available in all 5 boroughs of New York City, and later on in the presentation, I'll give you an update on where the sites are currently available. In the meantime, though, if you go to nyc.gov/empowerednyc, that is the portal that takes you to where you can sign up for a session. So you can walk your clients through doing that, or just give them the website so they can do it themselves, and then they will be able to pick their location and then their day based on the location and time. So please be sure to do that. We're very excited, and I think we've worked with a little over 200 people so far. So we have some great speakers with us today. And what we want to do is, our objectives are to make sure that you understand the Social Security Administration work incentives that can support individuals with disabilities who want to work, to learn how work incentives benefit individuals on both SSI and SSDI, recognize when a work incentive may be utilized, know how to request work incentives, and then we're going to learn about some specific real-life situations where work incentives have been utilized by our 2 presenters. So having said that, I am happy to introduce our first speaker, Mike Godinho. He's a certified benefits planner, and he works for Access to Employment and Information, LLC, and he is a Social Security Administration Ticket to Work employment network. And I know that he'll tell you a little bit about that, and you've heard about employment networks on some of our prior webinars as well. So we're very happy to have Mike here. He's a fellow New Yorker, and with that, I would like to turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Nancy. Managing your SSA benefits, it's a tough thing. We need to learn how to do it, and we need to help our participants do it, because it's not always the easiest thing, and it does require work on both sides. So let me start out, the next slide, with a little introduction to me. as Nancy said, my name is Mike. I prefer Mike. But I'm not just, if we all recall the Hair Club for Men, I'm not just the owner or employee. I actually am a member of the group itself. I acquired my first disability in 1982 when I had a motorcycle accident. I ended up becoming mobility impaired. I'm an amputee below the knee on the right side. And 10 years later, I woke up one morning, I couldn't see. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis that day. And so I do live as a member of the community. So learning about the work incentives was a whole learning process for me because there was nobody out there teaching me how to do it at the time. I was I am a white male. I grew up in an affluent family here on Long Island, and discrimination was a word in the dictionary until I lost my vision and tried to regain my life. So that's kind of a brief history. While I was regaining my life, I went back to school, acquired a few degrees, and I went to work for the independent living centers in Queens. That was where I got my start under a gentleman named Matt Saplin, who ran the mayor's office for a while as a commissioner. So I'm very happy to have gained that experience. But what it did teach me is that people with disabilities need to be able to attain their independence, and part of that attainment is employment. And if we don't know anything about the benefits, we really can't get to that level of full employment where we can be totally independent and functioning regularly. I became a practitioner, probably in the latter half of the first decade of 2000, when I was chasing, if you're from New York, you probably know Ray Chabullo or Ed Lopez. I chased them around New York City every time they came in and did seminars, and I learned about the work incentives way back then, prior to the certification. When the certification came about, I really was working full-time at the time. I didn't need to have the certification because I was kind of practicing within an independent living center, and I was recognized as somebody who understood work incentives. When I had the opportunity a few years ago, basically 3 years ago, I did go and get my certification, and I am a practicing benefits practitioner now. So I do enjoy that title. I'm currently, as Nancy said, managing an employment network over the last year and a half, and it's doing quite well. The referrals come in from Social Security mainly, and or people find me because I'm listed on the Social Security website, and they do call me up, and we need to work through the process. If we go to the next slide, I was asked today to discuss some of the work incentives that I've been able to implement with some of my participants. The work incentives that we do plan to discuss today are the impairment-related work expenses, the Student Earned Income Exclusion, the blind work expenses, and managing your benefits overall. I kind of touched on it in the beginning as somebody who had to learn and was not able to be taught, but given the current state of affairs, we really need to assist people in managing their benefits, and you'll see how I've been able to do that with these three people that I do plan to discuss today. If we go to the next slide, we'll start out with the first scenario. This woman, we'll call her Mary. She's a very nice lady that came to me through the SSA website. She found me, and she called me up. She said that she really wants to go to work as a teacher, but she didn't know how to go about that, and she asked if I could help. As it turns out, Mary is a woman in her early 50s now. She had stopped working a while back to raise her children. However, after 12 years of raising those children, she found that her disabilities didn't allow her to return to work. She had some disabilities that she knew about, but they weren't really prominent when she stopped working. But during the 12 years, she realized that she just couldn't go back to work. Some, mental illness, maybe a little bit of that, maybe some physical issues, but she just really wasn't ready to go back to work and couldn't find her way back to work. However, it was 12 years. If anybody here is working on work incentives, you know that Social Security does that 10 years. You have to have those 40 work quarters, or you're not eligible for SSDI. So her application rolled over to an SSI application, Supplemental Security Income, and she was only getting $700 at the time, and it was not enough to live on. Mary found that she was living far from where she wanted to be. She was living in Nassau County, and she, basically her life was out on the North Fork, if folks understand Long Island, but that's where her life was. And she ended up in Nassau County in a studio apartment in somebody's home, and all she knows is that she wanted to be a teacher. So when she found me, we kind of looked into her becoming a teacher, and she only had a bachelor's degree in teaching. She didn't have the necessary academics to become a teacher. So we ended up looking at teacher's assistants and found her a job where she's earning wages now as a teacher's assistant, and she's working 9 months a year. She's rolling right on the cusp of that break-even point, but yet she's under that break-even point at about $1,400 a month. So she's right there, and she could be over some months and under some months. And I said to Mary that, we need to look at maybe doing some ERWIs, some earned income work expenses. And we looked into those, and if we go to the next slide, you'll see what we did. First, we kind of looked at the ERWI for a wardrobe, uniforms it's called, and we tried to get her the uniform ERWI, and it was denied. Basically, Social Security Administration said everybody needs clothing to go to work, so although you did not have a wardrobe and you had to purchase a whole new wardrobe, we're not going to cover that, and they didn't. So they denied that. And as I said, Mary is very timid, and she didn't want to fight them on that. And we also looked at driving expenses. Mary doesn't use public transportation, never has, wouldn't understand the first thing about using public transportation, so she has to maintain a vehicle to get back and forth to work. We looked at maybe getting her some driving transit expenses on an ERWI, because it is an out-of-pocket expense, and we did take her through that, and that was, excuse me, also denied based on the fact that Social Security Administration said everybody needs to get to and from work, so we're not going to give you that. The third out-of-pocket expense we looked at was her talk therapy. As I said, Mary has some emotional issues that she deals with, and she doesn't want to use any type of professional payments because she really doesn't want to have it show up in her record. It does. Not that it's not trackable now to some extent if somebody wanted to track it, but it doesn't show up in her employment records, and it doesn't show up anywhere else because she pays it out of pocket. And she would rather keep it that way because that's who she is. So Mary does pay her out-of-pocket expenses around about $300 per month to sit with a talk therapist and deal with her emotions. And it works for her. So we tried to get that written off as an out-of-pocket work expense, and they first approved it in the home office when she first turned it in. However, when it went in for its review, it came back as a denial. And she called me up in a panic one day, and she said, why are they denying me? And they're telling me I have an overpayment. I said, it's not a big deal. Let's go through the process of putting together a reconsideration. So we had to put together a reconsideration, and she went down and filed it along with a letter from her therapist saying how this therapy assists her in dealing with her life activities and enables her to function on a daily basis so that she can get up every day and go to work and function on her job as a teacher's assistant. And it was then approved. But we had to fight that one. So there is how we keep her under that break-even point, because she does have this $300 IRWI that shows up each month, and so she's although riding the cusp, she's able to keep her SSI while she's working. Mary is busy looking for an apartment, and we're working on other stuff such as housing issues and all of that other good stuff. But I do that as an employment network and a benefits advisor. I go through all of the benefits, trying to get her into Section 8 on the North Fork where she wants to be, into a new job, because that's where she wants to be functioning as a normal everyday person. So that's what we're working on currently with Mary. And she's come a long way, and she's doing really well. I'm very happy that everything has worked out with her. If we go to the next slide, we'll look at scenario number 2. This is a young man named Danny. He's a good guy. He's 19 years old. He's getting ready to go to college. He lives at home with mom and dad. You've heard me say it about myself, but it's an affluent middle-class family living and working here in suburbia, Long Island. It's quite common that this is the demographic of the majority of Long Island, and I'm sure many people have seen some of the stuff that goes on here on Long Island as far as paying off colleges to get kids in, but that's neither here nor there. But what we have as far as Danny is concerned, he wanted to go to college, and he was number 3 child of 3, and the parents asked, because of your blindness, is there any assistance? And they went over to the Commission for the Blind, and he did not qualify based on the family income, and so he needed some assistance. So we looked at IRWIs, BWIs, and Student Earned Income. If we go to the next slide, it's kind of a little bit out of order. As I said, Danny went over to the Commission for the Blind. He registered for services to go to school. He was only looking for tuition. He really wasn't looking for a whole lot. But the Commission for the Blind here in New York State basically said that we're going to have to deny you based on the family income, because the state services now look at the overall income of the family unless the person is independent. So Danny was referred to us through the Commission for the Blind to see if we could help him. Affluent middle-class family versus SSI, Supplemental Security Income, is usually a tough thing. The folks here on Long Island don't want to be classified as somebody who's receiving government subsidies. We're not them, only because that's the way the folks here on Long Island think. And so we had to have a conversation, and I'm very happy to say Danny is very well supported by his family. So he has a great support system, and we met with mom and dad and Danny, but we convinced them that Danny had to claim his independence, make a Social Security application to see if we could get him on to Social Security, which would make him immediately eligible for commission services so that he could get his tuition paid, which was a good thing, and that's basically what the parents were looking for at the time, only to assist in the tuition. As it turns out, we managed to get the application in. Danny was approved for SSI as an independent person, living at home, paying rent to mom and dad, not just living at home under mom and dad's roof. But because he was now an SSI recipient, he might as well begin building his own wealth and assets for his future. So we took Danny through a couple of different things. We looked at blind work expenses because Danny is blind, and then we looked at the IRWEs, which the blind work expenses are, if folks don't know, are usually much better for someone who is on SSI if they are legally blind, because the BWEs will roll over after they're deducted, after you do that 1/2 separation. So before you do, it comes after you divide by 2, then you subtract the BWEs. The IRWEs, if folks understand the algorithm, happen prior to the division by 1/2. So you subtract the IRWE and then you divide by 2. So it becomes half the amount. So it really works much better if you can get in on the blind work expenses rather than the earned income work expenses. So we also looked at the Student Earned Income Exclusion for Danny. As it turns out, the Student Earned Income Exclusion is subtracted up top, and Danny was able to subtract his income up top, and if we looked at removing the income, he's not earning a whole lot. So basically, but he's working, and that's a good thing. So the Student Earned Income Exclusion allows Danny to keep everything he earns while receiving a full Social Security SSI benefit. And it really works well for Danny because he's able to maintain that, pay his rent, and also begin building his own assets for his future. So we took Danny through that. When calculating Danny's Student Earned Income Exclusion, what we had to do, because it's limited to certain dollar amounts. It's I believe it's $1,400 or something like that a month, and $7,500 a year. Those are round numbers. Please don't quote me on those numbers, but look them up, please, before you use them. But you're able to subtract, as long as the student is a student, even in the summertime, you're allowed to subtract up to those numbers, not starting at those numbers. So what we did with Danny was we taught him how to use the algorithm and go through and leave the Student Earned Income Exclusion out, calculate his number, get down to the bottom to see how much was going to be deducted from his Social Security SSI the following month, then take that number, double it, because you did that one half division. So if you double that number at the bottom, plug it back in as a Student Earned Income Exclusion, you would find that, you know, Danny was having to use $500 or $600 a month rather than the $1,700. So at the end of the year, he's not even going to use the whole $7,000, but he's going to use a majority of it. And so that's what we did for Danny. But we had to teach him how to do the whole algorithm, calculate his Student Earned Income, his deduction, double it, plug it in as a Student Earned Income Exclusion, and then redo the calculation so he was able to maintain his full SSI benefit. So it really worked for Danny, and it's working currently, and hopefully, you know, it will get him through his education. Just so that folks know, we took Danny through some other means to manage his assets now and in the future. I don't know if folks know and understand the ABLE accounts. but he has since opened an ABLE account, and he's reaping the benefits of having income while maintaining his SSI benefits and paying his own rent and living his own independent life while still living at home with mom and dad, but not having to go out on his own and suffer the high cost of living independently. So, you know, he's able to manage in all ways. If we go to scenario number 3, next slide, is we'll call this guy Anthony. He's also blind. We do a lot of work with blind folks because, as I said, I lost my vision in 1992, so I understand that system quite well. Anthony is receiving SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. He has a pretty vast work history with some high earnings, so his SSDI benefit is substantial, and he really doesn't want to give that up. So he was looking for ways around giving up his benefit, but more importantly is that Anthony needs to maintain his Medicaid, which is much more important to him than the SSDI benefit, because his Medicaid pays for his medications, and he takes medications that cost in excess of $10,000 a month. So Anthony needs to make sure that he can make sure his medications are covered so that he can function. And so he's chosen to become self-employed. And as a self-employed person, he's a contract employee who receives a check from 1, 2, maybe 3 companies, and he needs to report that income, but he also needs to pay tax on all of that income, whether it be now or in the future. Because he's earning this money and still receiving Social Security Disability Insurance, what we did with Anthony was we helped him to understand that if he pays a portion of his SSDI as a taxable earned income, so he's paying, I believe it's 15% of his SSDI is maintained as federal taxes, so that he's paying monthly taxes rather than having to pay quarterly taxes and or at the end of the year having to pay a lump sum to the IRS. So he's paying on a monthly basis through his Social Security benefit. So he's getting that, and he's also receiving his Medicaid buy-in because he is employed and he is paying taxes on the money that he earns, which makes him eligible for the buy-in. So he's kind of managing his benefits so that he can maintain his work. But because he's a contract employee, he needed to create a corporation so that the corporation receives the money. And because the corporation is receiving the money, he is not actually paid, but he has to pay taxes on what comes to him. And what comes to him on a monthly basis is a steady stream that's paid to him through the corporation. So the corporation is receiving maybe $3,000 in January and maybe $500 in February and maybe $700 in March and maybe another $4,000 in April. So because it fluctuates, it's got such dramatic fluctuations, he needed to make sure that his income would be steady on a monthly basis so that he didn't have to go back later and justify in Social Security's eyes that this money wasn't coming to him on a basically a monthly basis, is that it was an annual basis and that he needed to do the income averaging. He didn't have to do that because now the corporation pays him under his $1880 a month, and he is able to maintain a full working benefit while also receiving a full working income from both sides, the Social Security Disability and maintaining his Medicaid buy-in and also his income from work. So he's managing his revenue so that he stays under all his limits while still not jeopardizing any of his benefits. So it's really working out for him, and I'm hoping that, you know, any of these folks that I've been working with are able to explain how their benefits are working and why they're working to themselves and others. But also, if you guys have any questions, I mean, you can always contact me or get in touch with me through Nancy, and I'm willing to talk about it with anybody and how we can make it work, because we have to be able to manage these benefits. Otherwise, we fall off the cliff and end up only in a vicious cycle of maintaining the benefits and becoming collectors of Social Security for the rest of our lives, and there's no reason why anybody should have to do that. And I'm going to end it there, Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. That was great information, and hopefully we'll have time for some questions and answers a little later on. But you know, one of the things that I think is so important is that you're absolutely right. If somebody manages their benefits, then they can make it work for them, and don't have to, you know, live a life of poverty. So thank you for that. All right, so I am going to now introduce our next speaker, Daryl Ackley. I had the pleasure of meeting Daryl last summer at a customized employment retreat. He is the president and executive director of Ackley Counseling and Employment Services. He is joining us from Oregon, so he's about 3 hours ahead of us, so we appreciate you starting your morning off with us, Daryl. And with that, I would like to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, over here on the West Coast, of course, we don't have accents over here, like certain other people, like Mike, right? The only thing about this conference, I can't, you know, if you tell jokes and things, you can't tell if anybody even is laughing. So that's okay. I'm glad. Thank you for inviting me. So just a little bit about my background, and that is that my wife and I moved here to Oregon in 1975 from the Sacramento, California area. When we were first together, we lived in a teepee. So, yeah, you know, we're old hipsters. And had our kids, and we live up in the mountains. But I started out working for the state of Oregon as a clerical assistant for the welfare department. And then I worked my way through being food stamp certifier and adult assistance case manager, and eventually I ended up in the employment programs, where I remember my first day I was forced to actually, you know, you will do 100 cold calls a week, which I was not very happy about, but once I started doing that, I loved employment, and I never planned a career in that direction. That's how I ended up. After 12 years with welfare, I was hired as a vocational rehabilitation counselor for the Oregon Commission for the Blind, and I worked there for 22 years, serving 6 rural counties in southern Oregon. I was lucky because when I started in 1986, I was able to connect with the folks from the University of Oregon in the STP program. It was right when supported employment was starting, and so I was amazed by the light going on for me in terms of the capabilities of people experiencing disability, and especially experiencing blindness along with intellectual and developmental disabilities and other disabilities. So that's where I got my experience understanding Social Security work incentives, supported self-employment, and supported employment in community jobs. When I retired, I didn't want to really stop. I just was ready to move on to a new career like many of us do. And so I became an independent job developer, contracting with Commission for the Blind and with vocational rehabilitation in Oregon and in several counties, and enjoyed doing that. But eventually I was talked into starting a licensed provider agency through Oregon Department of Developmental Services and becoming really focusing just on employment and vocational services in community jobs. And we don't do anything like group employment or certainly not sheltered workshops or anything like that. We just help people get jobs in the community, individual jobs on the payroll of the employers, and that's been very rewarding. So I actually was an employment network for a brief period of time, but I had an email come from the Ticks to Work, the Social Security Administration, that went into my junk mail, and I never saw it, and the next thing I found out was that I had a email saying, "You're not an employment network anymore." So after all that work, I decided that it made a lot more sense to a contract with an employment network, which is Workable Solutions here in Southern Oregon. Janet Steebly, who is an associate of Griffin Hammett and Associates. So we worked together to start using these Social Security and PASS resources. And for a small provider agency like myself with 5 employees, accessing employment resources through Social Security is a real critical part of our budget, and it also is very important to the folks we serve. So, next slide. And I'm really going to talk, and I guess we'll go on to, we're just going to go to a couple of examples here. I've used all of these incentives, including blind work expenses and helping people access IRWIs. We work with a couple of people on developed subsidies so that they won't lose their Social Security disability insurance when they're working. And pretty much, if there's a resource there, we have helped people access those. So I'm going to talk about SRM, who is what happened is that the last 2 years I've also worked with Janet Steebly at Workable Solutions under a grant that we got from Oregon Developmental Disabilities to try to build the use of the capacity of our system by teaching other providers and the agencies we work with to understand Social Security resources and other resources from like IDAs and some of the other programs for folks. And so we've been doing that for the last year and a half. As a result, I built relationships, and more in-depth relationships and network through our employment first team of provider agencies and other government agencies. And I started getting referrals for the grant from Voc Rehab especially. And this individual was referred to us by her VR counselor to help her develop a PASS plan. She is deaf and she has a developmental disability. She, on her own, and with funding from Voc Rehab, completed her esthetician or her nail technician training, which took over a year and was pretty difficult. She needed a tutor, and she needed an interpreter, and Voc Rehab did assist her with that. And then she was hired, really one of the first places that they went into, she was hired as a licensed nail technician. What we found out, though, is that nail technicians generally need to become estheticians to be competitive in the field so that they can provide these other services. And there really was no job coaching services set up by VR when we came on board. And so after my meet and greet with this individual, it was like, she needs coaching. She needs a lot of support to make this job successful. And we did offer to do that, and we're contracted initially through Voc Rehab and now through the ongoing support system to provide the coaching services. But the other piece was that she needed the assistance in going back to school, which is supported by her employer, to get this other whole round of training, which also will require interpreter services and tutoring, coaching. And so through the grant, we helped her write a path, which will provide, as I say on the screen here, $8,700 in funding for the tuition from the program and some of these other services. We're also working separately with her to develop, I think we're close to having it approved, an IDA, an Individual Development Account, where through Oregon she can match her savings 3-to-1 at the end of a period of time and use that also for additional funding pieces. So we're pretty excited about this. She's really, you know, a great person to work with, and I'm just so impressed by her tenacity and how outgoing she is, and just she does a great job. Everybody that has had a pedicure or a manicure from her, just sing her praises. So we're very happy to be with her. But there was a big chunk of services from coaching to the additional training needed that there were no other funding resources for her in this situation. So that's one example of something that we've been working on. I think we'll go to the next slide. So J.H. was referred to us after high school. He was in transition. And we did what is called Discovery in Oregon, which is basically a career exploration 90-day period funded by the Developmental Disabilities Services. Kind of in Oregon, as a result of Discovery being funded by the developmental disability side of things, vocational rehabilitation doesn't like to do much additionally in the way of career exploration. And J.H. was a good example of somebody who, even after Discovery, just could not really come up with a clue of what he might be interested in doing for work, except that he loves computers, and he loves doing these YouTube videos where he is trying to teach other people how to go through video gaming and achieve certain levels. And apparently he's pretty good at it. So what happened is we didn't have vocational rehabilitation funding for him. They would not go back into spending money for him to develop a self-employment, which would be generally what you have to do in this case. And he still did not have a very clear vocational goal. So what we looked at is using a Social Security vocational evaluation path. These are very much underutilized, and they're great. They can go for 6 months, and they're designed for those people that don't have a vocational goal. You can fund a variety of things. Generally, you can't buy cars or equipment or anything that's specific to a vocational goal, but you can pay for coaching. You can pay for working with the workforce system people. You can pay for, like in our case, just the counseling and guidance of taking him out and setting up informational interviews. Actually, many of the things that vocational rehabilitation would pay for under career exploration. So this pass was approved within days, it seems like. It was pretty easy to develop, and we had to list the services, and the services were generally him paying us through the money he saved through the path for the informational interviewing and the career exploration services. The one thing I have to say that was interesting is that I found with JH and with other people is that we are so used for people depending on agencies and systems that take care of everything, that he was really hesitant about writing a check out to us for career exploration. And that mindset of figuring out, like, I can pay for this myself was difficult for him, but it was also great. I think it really empowers people to learn to do this, and by the end of the period, you know, when he made a decision that he didn't want to complete the entire 6-month path and he didn't want to complete his work experience, He wanted just to pursue this on his own without being involved with agencies. That, to me, that was a success. That was a success because he made informed choices, and we really assisted him in trying out quite a few things to figure out a direction to go. So the other service court that we accessed, though, was the work source programs through WIOA. And because he was under age 24, he was able to access this up to 250-hour paid work experience. What I found with the WIOA programs is generally, even though VR is a part of that, and that this doesn't really apply to them, but the other workforce programs have these work experience and other things in place, but what they don't generally have is the experience working with people with experiencing intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so what that meant is we really had to find the work site for him, and they would fund it. And we had to provide the coaching for him, which included having a coach attend their required foundational skills workshop before he could even access his work experience program. So these were all things that are not funded through any other source than this Social Security path. And I think, you know, the thing is he's moved on in his life toward his own goal, and, you know, we helped him a little bit on that path. We did some great informational interviews, setting him up with local technology providers who actually have a YouTube club for gaming, and he was able to connect with those people and find out all about that occupation, which is, he did find out that making money as a video gamer trainer is not an easy way to go. But be that as it may, you know, that's what he decided to pursue. So I think that is my two examples. I'm leaving a little bit of time here. The two things I would say to conclude is that on both sides, assisting provider agencies in stable funding to build capacity and expand their services is so critical, and using these Social Security and other resources when there are other resources available helps provider agencies. Secondly, the folks we work with, the participants, there are so many things here that cannot be paid for through any other method, and I believe that accessing the Social Security resources both empowers people, helps them become more independent and live their own lives without as much dependency, and helps them achieve goals that they couldn't otherwise. So I'm very happy that I didn't retire, and now I have a provider agency, and it's fun. So thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. We're happy you didn't retire too.
Yeah.
All right, I want to get us through a few more slides and then see if we've got time for some questions and answers. So action items. One of the things that I wanted to mention is we covered a lot of material in this webinar, which we tend to do. And we talked about blind work expenses, and we talked about impairment-related work expenses and PASS plans. And Mike was talking a little bit about, well, you know, if you divide by 2 and you subtract from the top, those types of things. That can get really confusing for individuals who are on SSI and SSDI. So I just want to remind everybody that the individuals, the financial counselors, have been trained in work incentives. They've been trained in Social Security benefits. So they have this knowledge. They're not benefits planners. However, they are able to provide people with enough information that will encourage them, hopefully, to go to work, encourage them to want to open a PASS. So please utilize those services. As you can see, to make an appointment with a financial counselor, go to www.nyc.gov/empowerednyc. So, and I want to let you know that there are several locations that are open, and we're going to be talking about this more in the next couple webinars that we have, but the locations that we have right now are West Tremont Ave in the Bronx, East Tremont Ave in the Bronx, Pitt Street, Lower Manhattan, Kingston Ave in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, and then Hanover Square in Manhattan. We also have 3 additional sites: Lehman College, but that is for Lehman students; Kingsborough Community College, again for KCC students; and then the Institute for Career Development, but that is specifically for Institute for Career Development customers. So when you go on to nyc.gov/empowerednyc, you will be able to pick a location. And then once you pick your location, you will be able to see what dates are available to schedule an appointment. So we've made it as easy as possible for folks to be able to get an appointment with a financial counselor. So I want to give you a few resources. The first is the Social Security Administration Red Book, and I think we've probably given this to you as resources 2 or 3, maybe even 4 times. There's a reason for that. It really is a great general reference guide on the employment-related provisions for both SSDI and SSI. It gives examples. So it's for educators, it's for advocates, it's for folks with disabilities, professionals who serve them. It really is a great resource. And then there's also a chart that we found on the Social Security Administration website, and it's called Work Incentives Detailed Information. And it's a chart that highlights all of the SSDI and SSI work incentives that are available. So you will see the link for that as well. And then lastly, Social Security publishes something called Working While Disabled, How We Can Help. So there is a link to the PDF there as well. So you can get that information, and hopefully that will help you understand benefits a little bit better and encourage you to reach out to the counselors to learn more. As usual, you can always contact myself, Wanda Lopez from the Office of Financial Empowerment, Crystal Rivera, also with the Office of Financial Empowerment, and or Abby Mayerhoff. Abby's with the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. We are all here to answer any questions you may have. Mike was very generous in saying that if you wanted to get in touch with him, you could do that. So if you want to get in touch with him, feel free to do that through me. And with that, I think we've got a few minutes. So, and by the way, I want to say thank you, because we got a comment in question and answers that somebody is really interested in a pass, Daryl, but was denied SSDI for the first round. She's currently appealing, but she's already ready to participate in that pass once she is formally on SSDI. So, so thank you for that. I do see that we have some other questions. One of the questions is, can we get the PowerPoint slides? Yes, we can. They will actually be up on our website. So we can, you can access them that way. And I apologize, I didn't see some of these other questions come in. So we will get back to you on some of those since we didn't have time. I apologize. So one question I would like to ask both of you, and maybe Mike, you could start, and then Daryl, you as well. What have you seen other people use IRWIs for, impairment-related work expenses?
The IRWIs are out there. They're really tough to use. You know, you have to submit them, and you know, the IRWIs come a lot easier, you know, if you constantly submit them. It's tough, but drug expenses, because some people have out-of-pocket drug expenses, especially we're working with somebody right now who uses an experimental medication, which we're trying to get covered under an IRWI, which is really it's a tough road to hoe, but we're getting there. We need to convince Social Security Administration that it is a real drug and it is helping her.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Daryl, how about you?
A couple of things separate from blind work expenses, which I was more familiar with, but I've been running into people who really need assistive technology for their job. iPads are very popular and usable. I have we're working right now with the person I used an example on in terms of getting training to use her iPad with a speech output program. And we've had quite a few people that, do not use verbal communication. And I found that the funding for, especially in employment, for the long-term supports for technology and for training for technology is very limited. So I think IRWI can be a source of help for that.
Great. Thank you so much, Daryl. I can't thank you both enough. The information that you gave on this webinar, I think, was absolutely fantastic. Al, can you go back to the contact slide real quick? I apologize, folks. I did try to answer a question in Q&A, but for whatever reason, it's not letting me send. So you see my name there, Nancy Bhutto, my email, nbutto@ndi-inc.org. Please just email me, and we'll make sure that we give you the resources that you're asking for. Again, I apologize for that. And real quickly, I just want to close us out on our last slide. And thank you all again very much for joining us. So next month is also going to be a very interesting topic that we're calling Tales from the Field, Stories from the One-on-One Counseling Sessions. So it'll help you get a sense of what's happening at those sessions and the type of information that that people are being given based on their situations. And we've got some real neat success stories that have happened already. So we're very happy about that. So that will be Tuesday, June 11th, next month, again from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock p.m. And please take our survey. That'll pop up next. Once you disengage, please give us information about how we can improve these webinars. And with that, again, I want to thank Mike and Daryl. You guys were fantastic, and we appreciate your time. And to everybody out there, thanks for participating, and we'll talk to you next month. Bye-bye.